Hi, friends. This is Terry Squires with today's Nashville, This is Faith. As we celebrate our 100th episode, Cornerstone Television and I would like to thank you for making the show a success and being one of your favorite programs. You know, we pray with every guest and every episode that their stories of faith will lead you closer to Jesus. This is today's Nashville. This is faith. I sat down with CeCe Winans, and she shared what it was like growing up Winans.
Where it all started, well, we would have to go to Detroit, Michigan,
Okay.
if we're going that far back. I was born to wonderful parents, David Winans and Dolores Winans, and had a pretty big family. They both had 7 boys straight, and I was the first girl, and I have 2 younger sisters, so I have 9 siblings.
Oh my goodness.
And both my parents sang, and my brother sang, and my sister sang. We all sang, and most of them play the piano. I don't play the piano, but most of them do. And but we started in church. We were singing in the children's choir, and my parents and the teacher teamed up on me and said, "You're going to do a solo." No, I don't want to do a solo. Always enjoyed singing, but never singing out front. And they gave me a song to sing entitled "Fill My Cup, Lord." And I started crying halfway through the song. Aww. And they made me do it again next year, the next year, and the next year. And each time I would get to a certain part of the song and start crying, you know. And I believe it was then, Terry, I realized that it wasn't just being nervous, but it was something that was bigger than me. You know, I could see when I sang, even as a kid, how people were affected by it and blessed by it. And even though I didn't want to be up there doing it, you know, my parents saw a gift in me and knew that God had a call on my life, even that young. So I was about 8 years old when I started singing, and then as a teenager, I started singing some background vocals. Andre Crouch was probably my first job that I had singing. I remember doing some background vocals for him as a teenager.
Who is your inspiration?
Who was my inspiration? Well, my family was, because my 4 older brothers, they started recording before I did. And I get inspired by different artists, of course. Andre Crouch would be one, because I saw God do something with his music and his talent that I loved. Whenever I would go to one of his concerts, I saw everybody, you know, his music. You saw everybody, all different cultures at his concerts, and I was like, yes, this is what music is about. It should touch the world. It should touch the heart. It shouldn't be put in a box. So I was always inspired by Andre Crouch a lot. But as far as my inspiration for life, it's my faith.
I sat down with Lieutenant Dan, Gary Sinise, and he shared his story from Hollywood to Nashville.
Well, I have Nashville. It's interesting. I lived, as I said, I moved to California in '87 with the family. Started having our family there. Did well in the movie business. 2 or 3 years ago, I started thinking that, you know, maybe it might be time to look for a no-tax state, because the taxes are going up in California. It's crazy, you know.
We're getting a lot of people here, aren't we?
Yeah, it's expensive there. It's expensive there. You pay the weather tax there. Everybody loves the weather. You pay the weather tax, for sure, among many other different things. But I just started thinking about a change for the family, and started looking at Florida and Texas and Tennessee. And I have, you know, I've been coming here for a while, you know, doing things at Fort Campbell. You know, I actually became an honorary member of the 160th Aviation Regiment. The the Night Stalkers. They're special operations aviation folks at Fort Campbell. They made me an honorary member. I've played concerts for their gala a couple of times. Have many friends here. And then it was a couple of buddies of mine that had a business in California, and they told me they were going to move to Nashville, and they had about 150 employees, and they said 125 of them are going to make the move. And I thought, well, I've been trying to figure out where to go. I think I'm going to focus my energy on Tennessee and really start looking around. We found a great house. I moved the foundation here a couple of years ago, and everybody loves it. And my daughters moved here. Their husbands both work for the foundation. My nephew and his family moved here. My wife's sister moved. We made a big move.
It's a great, great city. You're going to be playing at the Grand Ole Opry soon, right?
On Sunday, yeah.
So does the band go out a lot?
Well, yeah, we're going out this weekend. We're playing at Fort Leonard Wood. We're playing at Fort Knox, and then we're going to the Opry on Sunday. The Opry is doing something really fun called the Opry celebrates 30 years of Forrest Gump. And so we're going to have all the artists on the bill at the Opry are doing songs from the Forrest Gump soundtrack, and my band will be there. It should be a really, really fun night. It's my first time at the Opry. But they've been wonderful. They're a wonderful group of folks, and obviously we've got a great group of artists on the bill that night. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I sat down with Randy Travis and his wife Mary, and they shared their love story. But your love story started years ago, and you knew each other, and God has taken you through an amazing journey. And share a little bit about that, just, when you first met, and Mary, did you know right away when?
Well, I knew how fond I was of the person, of the heart. And we had met 30 years ago. I mean, now it was in 1990, so what is it, 31 years now? And I was working with my brother who was making shirts, the stub shirts that he wore. And he would pass through town, he and Lib, and so I knew them only from business and social. I mean, we would go to dinner, and so we spent time together, but watching him day in and day out when I was around him was that humility. Here's this monster of a man as far as the country phenomena that I just thought he was a prince of a person. He was so kind to everyone he ever met. He was so gentle and so humble, and there's something you love about that. He treated everyone the same. I wasn't going to not fall in love with him when I had the chance. We spoke and met, and we never looked back. I mean, it was just, it was something so magical, so wonderful, so quickly that there was, we know that it was in his plan, and we never know where he's going to take us.
So you knew right away once you started
away.
talking.
Right, that March 10th of 2010, I knew right away.
So what happened after that?
Well, we
Started a courtship? And
yes, and that went on for about 3 years. We got engaged in 2013, actually.
You ended up getting married.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Oh, well, it was a couple of years after we got out of the hospital, and it was Christmas, and we had talked about it under the Christmas tree, and our daughter Kavanaugh had worked with him and asked him, or told him again, or they worked on how to ask me to marry him again, because we didn't know, it wasn't the same as it was in 2013, obviously. And so he did, right under the Christmas tree, and that was in December of 14, and so March of 15 we got married.
March of 15.
Yeah, real quietly. It was wonderful.
Beautiful.
So
You have a beautiful love story. I sat down with Lily Isaacs, and she shared her life growing up and how her parents survived the Holocaust.
World War II started in September of 1939. My parents were from large families. My mother had four siblings, and her parents, and my father had 5 siblings, and his parents at home. And my father would always say that when the war broke out, there was some rumor around, but of course in those days you didn't have internet, and very rarely did you have a radio, so people really didn't know what was going on, but there's rumors of war going around. So my father said that all of a sudden one day out of nowhere, these big trucks came barreling, army trucks, Nazi trucks came barreling into the little town of Chenstokhova where they live. And he said that the soldiers would get out on the streets and get on these megaphones, and they'd order everybody on the street out of their homes, come out of the street. And if you didn't, they would go from house to house and just make everybody come out on the street. They had no clue why, but that's what they did. They didn't know if it was going to be a bomb or they needed to evacuate for whatever reason. But that's when they started, the Nazis started separating families. So my father and his brother were taken away from his parents and his other siblings. My mother also with her sister came out, and her mom never saw her mom again, or her brother or sister. So everything was chaotic. And they sent one person to this place, one person to that place. So they were transported. Of course, they didn't know each other at the time, just happened to be from the same hometown. But my father was transported to a Chenstokhov ghetto, and my mother was at the Warsaw ghetto with her sister. And then eventually they wound up in concentration camps. My father was in Buchenwald in Germany, and my mother was in Bergen-Belsen in Germany, 2 years.
How old were they?
My mother was 19, my father was 25.
Did they even know what was really happening at that time?
They had no idea. They had no, I wondered in my mind so many times if 6 million Jews were killed, plus others. If you knew you were going to be killed and your family, would you not fight back? They didn't know. They didn't know where they were going. And then they were on starvation diets, a crust of bread a day with a glass of water. That's all they got. So people were weakened and they get sick. And they had no idea. But they survived a nightmare. I heard a lot of stories from my mother, especially. She'd tell us a lot of the things that she and her sister survived and how they got through it. But in 1945, when the war was over, they were liberated by our American soldiers and our allies. And all of my life, my mother would say, when those American soldiers busted through those gates, she said they looked like angels from heaven. And we have a great respect for our military here because they freed my parents. So that was our humble beginnings.
So how did they meet then?
After the war was over, there were so many people that were emaciated. They were skin and bone. A lot of them were sick. So they started these places called displaced persons camps. And organizations like the Red Cross, United Jewish Appeal, B'nai B'rith came together across the world. And they went into Germany and into Poland, and they started these camps where they would have proper health care, nurse them back to health with food and whatever. And my parents met in one of those displaced persons camps in Feldafing, Germany, which is the outskirts of Munich. That's where they met. And I think they just had a lot in common because they were from the same hometown. And they got married there. And after they got married, they stayed 2 years. I was born there. And I have pictures of me when I was a little girl with my mother in Feldafing, Germany. But also, again, in those days, you had to have a sponsor that would send for you to come to migrate to a different country. My mother's brother was in America, and he sent for my father and my mother and I to come to New York. So we got on a ship. I don't remember it. Of course, I was only 2. I heard a lot of stories about how my mother was so seasick that my dad would have to hold me the whole time. But we landed via Ellis Island to the Hudson River and wound up in the Bronx. My uncle taught my father how to be a bread baker, which was his trade, and we started a new life here.
I sat down with William Lee Golden in his music room, and he shared his journey with the Oak Ridge Boys through the years. Everyone who thinks about the Oak Ridge Boys, they thought, you know, when I think of the Oak Ridge Boys, I think of your band, but it started before you.
Yeah.
And it was your dream to be an Oak, right?
Right. When I was singing part-time, you know, in high school, it was in high school when I first heard about the Oak Ridge Boys, and it was one of the guys I was singing an FFA quartet with was the one that brought one of their albums, and And then I had to go get the album, and it was 2 albums that really turned me on to the Oak Ridge Boys then. Was called Folk-Minded Spirituals for Spiritual-Minded Folk. And then the other one was the Oak Ridge Boys with Sounds of Nashville. Both of those albums were on Warner Brother Records back at that time. To me, those albums put them in a league that was a little different than what I considered a lot of the older gospel quartets and singers at that time. They were young guys and had a whole new flair about singing and playing music, and it resonated with me. I loved it. You call it a dream or whatever, but I'd worked with them when I was singing in part-time groups. I was working at a paper mill, working on a farm, and also had a job at the paper mill and singing part-time. And so that was out of high school, you know, and then I got married and had 3 little boys. And
Well, what was life like on the road
on the road
with the group, with the Oaks?
Well, when I first joined, it was in 1965 in January, and I joined. And at that time, we were a struggling gospel group, like several other gospel groups. We were all struggling to survive, and we all loved singing harmonies and gospel groups. So with the Oak Ridge Boys, it was a time that, you know, we had to book our own dates. One of the guys was one of the guys would either try to book the dates, kind of manage the group within the group. Before we had agents and managers and professional managers and professional agents, we just people wanting to sing, and I joined the Oak Ridge Boys then. But during that time period, we had a bus driver some, but then sometimes, you know, maybe a bus driver would leave and you couldn't replace them right quick. But then there would be time periods where we would be not only singing, but we'd be driving the buses too. And we'd take turns driving the guys. One guy would, and the shift you always hated was the second shift at night after a concert, because you'd be exhausted. But you know, one guy would have the first shift, and somebody's got to take the second shift. And we'd drive for like 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours, and then wake somebody else up.
When did things start turning around? When all of a sudden you started becoming extremely popular? You were touring the world. And I want to talk about your story about going to Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, the Oak Ridge Boys exploded onto the scene, and you rose to fame. What was that like?
I felt like we had gone as far as we could go in gospel music. We had reached the top. We had won Record of the Year and those type things. But yet, it was a struggle to get your gospel songs played on radio, because people didn't want to hear about that but one day a week. They may tolerate it on Sunday, but they don't really want to hear that on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Saturday. It was a thing that I felt like it was a time that the Oak Ridge Boys needed to expand our music. Having to live 7 days a week, but we're only singing about subject matter that most people only want to think about or hear on just one day a week, and that'd be on Sunday. So you have to realize who you are and where you are and what you really need to do, and you really need to expand your music. So what we did is we started talking with Jim Halsey. Jim Halsey was then and was always the top manager and top booking agent in country music. He managed Roy Clark his entire career, from time Roy Clark was a side man with Wanda Jackson's band, and Jim Halsey managed him from being a side man in Wanda Jackson's band to being a superstar. Jim also managed Hank Thompson, one of the early Country Music Hall of Fame people. He managed Minnie Pearl, he managed Mel Tillis, he managed, like I said, Wanda Jackson. She was in the Country Music Hall of Fame and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But 29 of Jim Hall's clients and former clients that he had managed them and booked them are now in the Country Music Hall of Fame. So he knew how to take a career, and he told us when we first got together, he said, guys, he come to see us perform. And after we performed, he come backstage. It was at the Ryman Auditorium. He said, guys, you're 3 minutes away from being a household name. And so what do you mean? He said, well, you need one song, one hit record, and you're on your way.
I think I know which one that is.
It was Y'all Come Back Saloon was the first one.
Okay.
But then we had several more, and then Elvira hit in 1981.
Yep, that's the one
We
I
had
remember.
our first country record and first country hit record in 1977. Then Elvira hit in 1981. Elvira went to the top of country charts and then just spilled right over into pop and rock and roll, and every other station then was playing Elvira during the summer of 1981. And then the next year we had Bobby Sue that kind of did the same thing. It was went to the top of country music, spilled over into rock and roll and pop music, and was played on all of those stations too. So that was in 1981 and 82, basically during the musical heyday of the Oak Ridge Boys for that time period, you know. And at that time, we sold more singles on Elvira then in 81 than any other single that had ever sold out of Nashville. The single itself was sold over 2 million singles, and that was unheard of. The album went to be a double platinum album at that time. And when that went double platinum, all their other albums went gold.
I sat down with comedian Chonda Pierce, and she shared her heartbreak and how God has healed her life.
You know, it's interesting. I always say grief is the gift that keeps on giving, and it does. And my heart is so tender toward other widows. And I see them, they'll come to my shows, they'll say something, oh, I read your book, or I heard your husband passed, and they want a helpful hint of what's going to get through it. And I always tell them, as much as I hate to tell you this, it's just time. It just takes time. And so don't be afraid to weep. You know, I always say, getting through grief is 3 W's, you know, wake up. You know, in other words, that means just get out of bed, do the next thing. The other one is let yourself weep. But the third one is worship every chance you get.
Oh, that's good.
Because when you worship, you know, even if it's running the vacuum and playing your favorite praise music, there's something about that puts your mindset and puts all your grief in perspective. It doesn't make it easy. I still miss my man very, very much.
How long has it been now?
It'll be, actually, while we're filming this, it's 9 years tomorrow. Yeah.
Tomorrow.
So it's tender. Those are triggers, we call them, when a birthday comes along. And as you well know, talking about the past, if I get a trigger, then I have a snowball reasons to cry and grieve. And my brother and I are the only living members of our family now. You know, I was sitting on a picnic table at the farm the other day, and I said, the farm looks so good, we should have a family reunion. He goes, we are. But what I love about that, we still maintain a sense of humor. You know, not long ago, I dug up my whole, family that was in one cemetery, part of the family's in another one, dug them all up and took them all out to the farm, and it became the funniest day of my life.
Well, I saw it. Did you have video? Did you have video?
I videoed it because just thinking this is going to be funny because my brother couldn't be there, so I wanted to video it for him. And then I kept commentating. I told my son, because there was 4 bodies on a flatbed truck. It's the way you do it in Tennessee. And I kept telling my son, I will give you $100 if you go through McDonald's and order 4 cheeseburgers just to watch their face. And he goes, Mom, did you take your meds?
And you took him to the farm.
I did.
I sat down with Governor Mike Huckabee, and he shared how a broken finger led him into his career today. When did you know the call on your life?
Well, it was probably when I was 15. I started work at a radio station at the age of 14, which was the result of a broken finger at age 11, playing Little League Baseball. The quick version of the story is I was playing baseball. I was a catcher. We were a horrible team, never won a game. And a kid hit a foul tip, and I did something catchers intuitively know they're not supposed to do. In addition to my mitt, I put my hand out here because I wanted to make sure I caught the ball. I misjudged it. The ball took this index finger and just bent it back toward my elbow. I mean, it just shattered it. And I held it up and I said, "Hey, coach, I think I broke my finger." I could have been an orthopedic surgeon with diagnostic skills like that. And of course, it ended my baseball season. They told me I could go to the press box and help work on the public address system and announce the batters. Okay, free Cokes, free popcorn doing that. Hope was such a small town that the local radio station broadcast all the Little League games. Now think about how boring that must have been, but they did it. The manager of the station came, and he didn't want to do it because the guy that normally did it got sick. He said, "Kid, would you like to call a few innings?" I said, "Sure." They passed me the mic. Innings later, he said, "You're not bad. When you're 14 and can get your license, come see me, I'll give you a job." And that was the beginning of that.
Beginning of the.
Yep.
I sat down with Jimmy Fortune, and he shared his journey through his bypass surgery.
Well, I had a couple friends that had had heart attacks and strokes. They were actually younger than me. And so all these alarms were going off inside of me. And my wife said one day, told her about some little issues I was having. She said, "We're going to make you a doctor's appointment." And I'm like, "Okay, you can if you want to. I don't think there's anything wrong." So I go into this doctor's appointment and I start telling him what's going on. I passed every test but one. He said, "We're going to do a heart catheterization on you." He said, "I think you might need a stent or something like that." And I said, "Okay." So we lined it up. So I go in and do the catheterization, and he puts this screen up in front of me after it's all over. It shows me my heart, which have 5 blockages, and one was 99%, the others were 95% blocked.
5.
And he said, "I don't know how you're walking around. You hadn't had a massive heart attack yet." He said, "We're going to do emergency surgery. We're going to take you right to the hospital down to Centennial and do surgery, major surgery." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I've never had major surgery in my life." And it was a whirlwind. And so we went in and had the surgery done, and everything was fine. Oh my gosh.
Were you scared? or?
At first I was scared, and then I got to the hospital, and Nina came in, and she said, well, she just had put the announcement out that I had on Facebook that was what I was going to have to go through. She told me, she said, "Jimmy, you wouldn't believe how many people are praying for you right now all around the world." And when she said that, I just felt like I was floating on a cloud. I had no worries, nothing like that at all. So I had to have the surgery. I had this, went into the prep room, and of course I had some of my family with me. When they left, there were some of the doctor, or not nurses there, that were getting me ready for the surgery. Gave me the shot, which only takes a few minutes, a few seconds. You go out. But as soon as she gave me the shot, they walked out of the room. And I heard this voice say, "I've got you." And I was like, I looked around like, where did that come from? And I knew that it was God saying, "I've got you. Don't worry," and I didn't. I don't know, I was so thankful that God spared me a heart attack, that I didn't have that to go through. And I remember a few hours later, they got me up to walk after the surgery, and I walked, and I was just eager to get back, get going. And when I got home for the first time, I sat on my back porch, and of course it was during a cold time of the year. But I sat on my back porch, and when I sat there, the sun was shining right down on me, and the beautiful white puffy clouds and a blue sky. And I just broke down and started just thanking God, just thankful. And I've been that way ever since, trying to come up with words to say thank you, and I can't come up with the words, but I know He knows. I'm very thankful that He brought me through it, and I felt like He still has things for me to do.
Thanks for watching. We have many more stories of faith coming. This is Today's Nashville. This is Faith.